07-16-22.
Hello everyone, and welcome to the second session of the Youth Side event of the High Level Political Forum 2023. Earlier in the evening, we had a discussion on it was the workshop on SDG 11 and youth, and it was on the youth statement of the UN Habitat Assembly. And we had an engaging conversation during that session, and the panelists were joined from all around the world virtually. As you can see that in this panel, we have 90% of the speakers, they are present with us. And most of the people who are watching us are virtual, and they are usually based in Global South, especially in Africa, Middle East, and South Asia. That's where they're watching us from. So this session, this conversation is more of a Q&A and in-depth conversation on the implementation of SDG 11 and the role of youth in doing so. SDG 11 is the Sustainable Cities and Communities, and that goal intersects with all of other SDGs. For example, the climate change, it's one of the important issues that we are facing and working on, and it's intersect with the SDG 11, and then the creating decent job and economy, education, poverty, and technology. So SDG 11, Sustainable Cities and Communities, it's all intersection, and we are here to discuss the role of young people in achieving the SDGs and different intersections. And we have quite a diverse and expert panel from all around the world. There are people in this panel, they are from different places and different organizations, and we are also being joined online by two of our panelists and guests. So to start the conversation, I would like to request the host, Mayor Hilmi Turkmen, the mayor of Üsküdar City in Turkey, to give his remarks on video.
Can we just postpone that and start? I'd like to.
Okay. So we'll start with Kakisha.
Yeah.
All right.
Then I need to give her the.
All right. So we're waiting for one more speaker. So when he's here, then we can continue with that. So we'll just move forward with the conversation. And we, in the panel, I'm joined by Ms. Kakisha Basu, who is founder and president of the Green Hope Foundation. Welcome. And I'm also joined by Dr. Lucas Walter, who is Chief Organization Development and Strategy, AFS. Thank you, Lucas, for joining us. We are joined by Dr. Jenny Moore online. She's joining us online, and she is from the Institute Sustainability at the British Columbia Institute of Technology. Thank you for joining us online, Jenny. We're also joined by a youth leader from the major group of children and youth, Ms. Catherine Sotomayor. Thank you for joining us, Catherine. We are also joined by Ms. Karuna Rana from Mauritius, who's a co-founder of SID's Youth AIS Hub. Thank you for joining us. And last but not least, we are joined by Mr. Brenton Koma, who is Global Director of the UN Sustainable Development Solutions Network. So we will hear from all of them one by one. And for me, I am the UN representative for the AFS Intercultural Program, which means Lucas is my boss. Thank you everyone for joining. So Kakisha, we'll start with you on the topic with your presentation.
And just, I think that the keys work. Yeah. There.
Amazing. Thank you very much. And hello, everyone. I'm delighted to be here with all of you today in person and share this space with you and speak on a topic that I'm very passionate about, my team's very passionate about, and one I feel is really not discussed enough within the context of sustainability, because honestly, it would not be an understatement to say that urban sustainability is absolutely essential for achieving Agenda 2030, and the pandemic has kind of pushed back a lot of the progress that had previously been made in terms of achieving urban sustainability and involving all stakeholders. But now we're seeing that urban sustainability is more important than ever before. And particularly engaging young people, where we form such a huge part of society's demographics. That is of utmost importance. And that's really what we see through our work at Wingo Foundation, working on the ground. We work in 28 countries, and a lot of our work with our 500,000+ audience focuses on empowering youth through concrete ground level actions to achieve urban sustainability within their own societal context. And we do so in a variety of ways. I really wanted to take this opportunity to share some of the work that we do within this urban sustainability context, because a lot of the time people, especially we see with the young people that we work with, that they think that living in cities, they either can't take any action or they shouldn't take any action because it's kind of someone else's job to do that. But really our work with our young people shows that it is possible to achieve social, economic, and environmental sustainability within the city's context. So the first example that I wanted to give was from our headquarters, which is in Toronto, Canada. Now, Toronto is home to the world's largest and only urban ravine system, but unfortunately, what we see working with a lot of the people, and particularly young people there, is that they had no idea about the significance of having such a huge belt of greenery within the city, and what losing this greenery could do to not just Toronto, but to the entire Canadian region as well. So our programs focus on educating young people about this wonderful area of green that's within their city, conducting cleanups within the ravine system. A lot of people use it as trails for hiking and walking and leave behind a lot of litter, which is just so terrible to see, and it affects the ecosystem in a really negative way. But our young people conduct regular cleanups, even sometimes in the snow, in the winter, to make sure that this is preserved for present and future generations, and it's spreading that awareness to their peers. The second example that I wanted to share, and something that actually gained a lot of popularity during the pandemic, is our Grow Your Own Food campaign in cities. So this right here is in Paramaribo in Suriname, which is also known as the world's most forested country. And our work with the children here in this urban community is educating them on actions that they can take within their school environment by building kitchen gardens and growing their own food and ensuring that this is organic, it's done so in a way that is planet smart and socially smart as well. And this also intersects with our mental health and nature campaigns, because it enables them to spend time in a kind of nature-based environment, even though it's in the city and kind of removed from the Amazon rainforest. They still get to be able to spend time in nature and kind of take advantage of all of its healing benefits. And the Grow Your Own Food campaign also sees success in other very urban regions, for example, in Dubai, UAE, where we partner with a lot of schools to ensure that they are able to build like these not just kitchen gardens, but just like really big areas of planting where they can grow their own food for neighboring schools as well. And a lot of our members practice the Grow Your Own Food campaign in their places and their terraces, just so that they can kind of tell people that, and show people that in a stereotypical urban environment it's possible to be green and help out the planet. Sticking with kind of helping out the planet. A lot of our work also focuses on urban tree planting and urban fruit tree planting, for example. So whether that's in Dubai or in Kolkata in India or Toronto or in Lima in Peru, in all of these different contexts, we work with our members to identify local species that had previously either been kind of eradicated due to like urban development and urban expansion, and working to really reforest the area so that we were able to reduce greenhouse gas, kind of offset the greenhouse gas emissions and make sure that the young people know what they can do within their own city context to help their urban environment flourish. A really cool campaign that we actually do in Dubai is that, Dubai has a lot of beaches and obviously they have a lot of tourists as well. Unfortunately, one of the side effects of that is a lot of cigarette stubs get left behind, and cigarette stubs are extremely harmful for our planet. I think we all know that they have cellulose acetate in them. That's a plastic that just doesn't decompose. It takes thousands of years to decompose, and it's obviously harmful to the marine life as well. So our members conduct specific cigarette stub collection campaigns to make sure that the beaches are clean and green, and also spread awareness about the importance of sustainable urban tourism in areas that depend on tourism for a lot of their income. And we work on recycling campaigns to make sure that young people and society is aware of what they can do within their community. And more than that, we actually conduct educational trips for young people in schools to recycling plants to see where their waste lands up, how it's segregated, where it kind of goes after that, how upcycling might sometimes be a better option because recycling does take a lot of energy. A lot of the young people we work with don't have an idea of where their waste ends up. They know they're recycling, but they don't know where it kind of goes after that. So this is a way to kind of break that barrier that does exist. And it's just amazing to see just the young people kind of absorbing that knowledge and taking it back to their school and their friends and seeing how best they can, again, contribute to a sustainable society. And finally, all of this kind of hinges on education for sustainable development. So this right here is in Monrovia, Liberia, one of our most active chapters where our members educate students and young people about the importance of waste management within their city. And I kind of decided to end with education for sustainable development because you need knowledge to be able to act, and there are so many misconceptions surrounding urban sustainability and what can be done, and young people aren't, particularly in cities very often, sadly, aren't taught about the actions that they can take within their own city context to really achieve a more sustainable world. So, earlier it was mentioned that SDG 11 has intersections with all of the SDGs, and that's something that we see through our work on the ground in urban sustainability to really create a more secure, stable world. And given that, we are seeing tremendous urban expansion now, our world is just full of cities. We cannot leave behind all of these people who live within cities. It's important to engage them, and Agenda 2030 requires all of our engagement, all of our actions, and that is exactly what we seek to do at Green Hope Foundation, ensuring that urban sustainability is at the core of the Sustainable Development Agenda and addressing all of its unique intersections. So thank you very much. Back to the moderator.
Thank you so much, Dr. for your presentation. Next, I would like to give the floor to Dr. Lucas Welcher from AFS Intervention Programming to have a conversation.
Thank you, Ali. Thank you. After disclosing our new roles, and it's a difficult position to be here now. Okay. I'm Lucas Welcher. I'm originally from Brazil, and I've been working for AFS intercultural programs for the past 16 years. AFS is the oldest and most traditional high school exchange program. AFS was founded as an exchange program right after the Second World War, and with this idea of public diplomacy, exchanging people to people so people could get to know each other's culture, value systems, and everything that makes us citizens and part of the planet. And maybe, wars could be avoided in the future, the more we get to know about each other and the more we get to understand and respect and value the differences that we have in the planet. And largest youth population ever on this planet, urban planet, most of the people on this planet live in cities. There is not a single problem in the future that would not involve youth and living in cities. So with AFS, we exchange about 12,000 high school students every year, which is a very large number for considering high school students between the ages of 15 and 17 years old. It's a very special age because adolescents at that age are still developing their values. They're still trying to understand what's right, what's wrong, what are the boundaries, and how they can create a difference and how they can participate as active global citizens in the world. So we have this precious resource of 12,000 participants every year. And a few years ago, we realized, okay, so what's one of the main gains of students going abroad? They developed empathy for problems, for causes, for solutions, for people that not exactly connected to them in the first place. So being able to live abroad and to develop a value system that involves empathy and connecting with a problem that's not yours, it's very unique to the kind of programs we developed. And then we realized that, okay, so we want people to make a difference. We want people to go back home and to do something to positively impact the communities where they live on, the schools where they study, the workplaces where they're going to work, or the organizations that they volunteer. So what creates a change maker by the end of the day? It's this ability to connect to a problem that's not yours, so this empathy, this ability to connect, and change making skills that now are quite very widely available. When we talk about ideation, when we talk about fundraising, skills that about 20 years ago, not a lot of people were talking about, but now it's very easy to get them available to people. So, and developing empathy is not so easy. It's one of those things that, it requires a lot, and there's not fully explained how this whole process works. But we know for sure that, our exchange programs, they work really well with empathy. And then about 5 years ago, we started including what we call a change-make component that we developed with the University of Pennsylvania and some other organizations to be part of the curriculum while those students are abroad. So we have this huge empathy factory combined with change-making skills, and then we have a change-making factory. So we have 12,000 participants every year that are exposed to, the need to do something, the possibility to connect with problems that are not theirs, to connect with solutions that are not theirs, and willing to do something. And at the same time, when we ask those teenagers, so do you want to make a difference? And of course, the answers vary, but in countries like Brazil, they say 85% of them say, yes, I want to make a difference. In countries like Japan, 45% say, yes, I want to make a difference. But even in a country like Japan, that we believe, solves most of societal issues, 45% of the kids still want to make a difference, or still want to contribute. It's fantastic. And then when we ask them, so what's preventing you for taking action? Well, the answer to reality is usually, I don't know anyone who's making a difference, so the lack of role models. So we need more role models in this area. But sometimes the lack of skills. I don't know how I can make a difference. I don't know where to begin. So here comes the change-making skills. Sometimes I don't have the resources to do certain things, so we need a lot of seed money or initial funding for those participants, for those students to do something. So then we realize that yes, we have a very impactful program or idea in our hands. So we've been implementing this change-making program for the past years with a huge degree of success. And here comes where the UN system comes into. Because most of the time we say, I don't know exactly what to begin, I don't know exactly what to do. And the SDGs are the best framework ever. Because for most of young teenagers that have no idea where to begin, the SDGs, they provide a very clear path, they provide very clear ideas on how to move forward. And in the past years, we've also been asking those teenagers, so if you want to do something, what do you want to do? And then we'll be learning that most of the solutions that we need are already out there. We don't need to invent a lot of new things. But they're asking, how can we scale things up? So I think the biggest challenge we have nowadays is not so much come up with some new ideas, because most of the ideas that we need are already out there. Of course, we need more ideas, and they are always welcome. But our teenagers are very concerned with the fact, how can I help to scale up some of the ideas, or some of the projects, or some of the things that are proven to work to resolve some of the problems that we have large cities or involving the environment and everything that we need. So we moved from this idea of being a pure exchange student organization that moves people around to be an organization that educates what we call active global citizens, by moving people and where they can acquire the empathy to connect with a problem that's not yours in the first place, and giving them the change-making skills and providing the SDG framework so they know exactly where to begin some of the ideas. We believe we can have 12,000 change makers every year ready to take action, ready to come up with some projects and initiatives. And we'll be collecting some amazing stories of people that are really taking action and people that are moving forward. But one of the things that we are learning now is that not so much coming up with new ideas, but scaling ideas that are out there. And that seems to be one of the things that I'd be very interested to discuss and also to hear from my colleagues in this panel. And just to then, we're also very worried about platforms for this year for young people to act. So AFS, we incorporated the and the Youth Assembly is probably well known in the diplomatic or in this realm here. It's a platform for young people to come together and to discuss and debate and to share some of their ideas. And in 3 weeks from now, we're going to be hosting another Youth Assembly here in New York. That's probably one of the largest ones, with more than 800 participants from 103 countries coming to New York to discuss, debate, what can be done for the future of this planet.
Thank you, Lucas, for your intervention. Next, I would like to give the floor to Dr. Jenny Moore to give her introduction and her remarks on the topic. Dr. Jenny Moore.
Thank you. Thank you very much for having me. I will just start by saying it's a real honor and very inspiring to hear what's already taking place. I started my career as a youth, as Metro Vancouver's first air quality planner in charge of climate action at the young age of 28. So the definition for youth has been creeping up over the years, but I have learned over the course of my career that we are in an urban world, we are in a youth world, and it is now everyone's problems. The issues that we haven't been able to solve over the last decades now, it is on the youth's shoulders to solve. And so for me, there's tremendous power that comes with this. When we look at the Changemaker training, we also offer a Climate Changemakers Youth Leadership Training that we've run across Canada, and I'm really excited to link up with other places around the world on this. I do think that youth have an unlimited, barrier-free perspective around how we can move these initiatives forward, and the reality of what's happening now is a huge incentive. Also just want to flag one thing that's very exciting is the International Standards, Sustainability Standards Board has just on June 26th released a new standard for sustainability for corporate reporting. This is for global corporations around the world around dealing with sustainability risk and opportunity. And until we start addressing that underlying global economic system that systemically has undervalued ecological and social impacts of our actions, very little of what we're doing around sustainability will have true leveraged impact. So when we talk about scaling and leveraging, I'd like everyone to think about how does our global economy currently value social and ecological costs and the distribution of who benefits and who pays? And how can we, through our efforts, start to really shift that dynamic? Because that is when the global systems will start to fall into place around leveraging the technology innovations, leveraging the good acts of environmental conservation, leveraging the social equity strategies. And I would say that sustainability really starts with social equity and social justice. And from that, we can start to value everything else accordingly. So thanks for the opportunity to be here. A lot of my work is really focusing on enabling youth to take practical skills through a polytechnic education model around green buildings, clean energy, environmental renewal, ecological restoration, and what we are calling regenerative development and design in cities. So I'm a planner by profession. My PhD is in planning and ecosystems, and my whole career has been in climate action. So I'm very inspired by what else is going on in the world, and very thrilled to participate and happy to share with anyone through the dialogue from 3 decades worth of professional experience in this field. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Jenny Moore. So we'll move towards the second segment of the panel, and now I would like to request Mr. Doug Reagans to play the video of the mayor.
Saygıyla selamlıyorum. Değerli katılımcılar, sizleri İstanbul Üsküdar'dan saygıyla selamlıyorum. Teknolojinin yardımıyla sizlere uzaktan seslensek de aslında kalbimiz, gönlümüz sizlerle beraber. 31 Ekim Dünya Şehirler Günü'nün İstanbul Üsküdar'da yapılacak olmasının heyecanını daha bugünden yaşıyoruz. Sizlere 31 Ekim Dünya Çevre Günü'nden ev sahipliği yapacak olmamızdan da büyük bir gurur ve onur duyduğumuzu ifade etmek istiyorum. Özellikle Üsküdar Belediyesi olarak kalkınmış, kalkınabilir şehirleşme, sürdürülebilir şehirleşme hamlelerimizde önemli başarılara, önemli projelere imza attığımızı belirtmek isterim. Hem bizler hem de bu toplantıyı dünyanın dört bir tarafından katılımlarıyla onurlandıracak olan üst düzey yöneticiler, metropol şehirlerin belediye başkanları ve sahasındaki uzman kişilerin tavsiyeleri, görüşleri, önerileri bu toplantımızda bizlere ışık tutacaktır. 31 Ekim'deki toplantının önemli bir konu başlığı da takdir edersiniz ki sıfır atık ve çevre konusu olacaktır. Dolayısıyla önemli, hassas, ötelenemez, ertelenemez bir konuyu hep birlikte masaya yatıracağız. Bu toplantının İstanbul Üsküdar'da yapılmasında emeği geçen, başta Sayın Cumhurbaşkanımızın kıymetli eşi Sayın Emine Erdoğan hanımefendi olmak üzere ve yine Birleşmiş Milletler Habitat İcra Direktörü Sayın Meymune Şerif hanımefendi olmak üzere emeği geçenlere özellikle teşekkür ediyorum. Daha şimdiden 31 Ekim'de yapılacak olan bu toplantıya ev sahipliği yapacak olmanın heyecanını yaşıyoruz. Ve özellikle bu toplantıya çok özel ve çok hassas bir hazırlık yaptığımızı da ifade etmek istiyorum. Ve inşallah 31 Ekim'de İstanbul'da, Üsküdar'da buluşmak üzere her birerlerinize tekrar saygılarımı sunuyorum. Toplantının başarılı geçmesini temenni ediyorum.
So just to give a little bit more context, so the mayor of Üsküdar, and Üsküdar is the next host of World Cities Day on October 31st, and he was the person who made this possible to be able to hold this as a hybrid event and be able to be hosted by the governor of Turkey. So we're very honored for that. And now, as we were supposed to do at the beginning, but now we're in the second half. Maybe the Deputy Executive Director could come up and speak now. So this is UN Habitat's Deputy Executive Director, who's been in the job for 2 months or 3 months. So welcome. Round of applause.
Hello, good afternoon. Thanks very much for having me. Apologies for a slight delay. It's a busy agenda for all of us during the HLPF these 2 weeks. As you know, we just last week presented our report on the implementation of SDG 11 on cities and sustainable communities. We are very happy to have a lot of discussions on urbanization, on sustainable cities, on localization of SDGs, but also on climate, on housing, on urban crises, just to mention a few of the key topics that we as UN Habitat are engaging in. Indeed, as Doc has just said, I started in my current position as Deputy Executive Director of UN Habitat in April, But before that, for almost 6 years, I served as the ambassador and permanent representative of Slovakia to the UN here in New York. So, of course, this is in one way or another my home territory. And youth has always been youth engagement and youth participation, championing of youth involvement in decision making has always been among my key priorities. So of course, I do take the same as really an imperative for us also in UN Habitat. UN Habitat has engaged with youth for over 20 years. We have created one of the first UN agencies, the youth programs back then. And of course, direct participation and involvement of youth in the cities, municipalities, urban contexts is not a question, it's a given. And of course, our task is to collectively make sure that it really is meaningful, transformative, and that through that we can really do some good work and bring up some important changes in the urban context. I have mentioned localization. This is probably the most important message that we as UN Habitat are bringing to the SDG Summit in September, because we need solutions. We all know that we are lagging behind, that we are not moving as fast as we should have, and of course there are some objective reasons such as the pandemic and other global challenges, but in addition to saying that, of course we need solutions, and one of the key ones definitely is localization of all SDGs. I'm not only talking about SDG 11, and we at UN Habitat are very much committed to even more involve the local actors, mayors, governors, municipal councils. Many of them have youth advisory boards, or many of them, of course, communicate and engage the young people, as well as they engage with the grassroots organizations, women's groups, and others. And they all need to work together also on the local level to deliver those important services for the people, because without those, obviously we will not be able to really not only implement SDGs in general, but bring the necessary change to the people in the interest of really focusing properly on the overarching principle of the 2030 agenda, which is leave no one behind. And we often in the cities and communities context, we often add leaving no one and no place behind. So, this is just the basic framework. Earlier today, I had an opportunity to also compare notes a bit with my dear friend Jayatma Wikramayanake, the outgoing Secretary General's youth envoy, and I visited for the first time the new premises of the new UN Youth Office. So, of course, a lot of further focus and discussions on that. Of course, UN Youth Office is also preparing very much for the SDG Summit and for the pre-summit events, which will also include a lot of the youth component. And I can assure you that UN Habitat certainly will be part of that. So I hope that this clearly states that we take youth as key stakeholders, and we don't take it for granted, but of course we put a lot of emphasis on direct youth participation, and it is for the purpose of really tackling the challenges that we collectively need to address, starting with climate change, but also conflicts, inequalities, and obviously the aftermath of the COVID-19 pandemic. And part of the reason is that in the implementation of the 2030 agenda, obviously we need innovations, we need innovative solutions, and many of them are coming from no one else but but the young people. I have already mentioned the SDG synthesis report, which we have presented during the HLPF, and if you have a chance to look at it, you will see that there are some alarming facts which are involved in it, such as more than 318 million people who experience some form of homelessness. 3 billion people worldwide experiencing inadequate housing situations, which is indeed alarming. Or, if you will, I can turn it around and also mention that if we would like to close the housing gap that we have globally, we would need to build 96,000 housing units daily. So, of course, this is a huge task and a huge gap. But again, as I said before, it should not discourage us or it should not scare us, but it should mobilize us. And it should make us really forge even stronger partnerships between the UN system and youth organizations, but of course, obviously also with the municipalities, with the mayors, governors, local actors, but including also with the private sector. And when I'm speaking about the housing gap, it has to involve the private sector, because private sector often see housing as an investment, and it's a good context that we need to include. But of course, this cannot leave out the poor, the needy, because it should not only be the investment for the wealthy or for those who can afford buying housing units or who can pay for the mortgage. So this is really something which is at the center of our attention. UN Habitat has recently also published a report on the youth housing crisis with the University of British Columbia. It highlights the financial and institutional barriers faced by youth in accessing housing, high housing costs, low incomes, limited access to credit or loans. They do pose significant challenges, particularly for marginalized youth. And institutionally, existing housing policies may not adequately prioritize the unique needs of youth, resulting in a lack of appropriate housing options. We work also with Foundation Botnar in the context of Youth 2030 Cities program, engaging young people in the urban agenda, but also, of course, focusing on public spaces. That's yet another crucial aspect where youth plays a significant role. UN Habitat also has an important program called Safer Cities, where young people are absolutely crucial actors in order for us to ensure that our cities are livable, but also safe. So, this is but a small example of the various contexts that we work in. And of course, we look forward to engaging with you further and continuing working with you in the preparations for the SDG Summit and then for the Summit of the future. So let's focus our collective efforts in that context. Let's stay really well coordinated, and I'm sure we'll be able to deliver some good and important results. And I can assure you, on behalf of UN Habitat, that we stand ready to continue engaging with you, do more, and be more active and more visible in this particular context. Thank you, and back to you.
Thank you so much. So with that, I would like to extend invitation with Lucas's permission. Like, we are hosting Youth Assembly next month, and it's gonna, like, 800 plus young people are going to be there from over 100 countries, and it's going to be the 28th session of the Youth Assembly. And we're starting it with the celebration of International Youth Day on August 11, and we would be pleased if you will come and give some remarks, because the theme of International Youth Day is green skills for the youth, and it's really important on that topic that if you can come and speak. So we would like to invite you, and it would be great.
Thanks very much. Youth Assembly of AFS is not a new platform to me. When I served as ambassador of Slovakia here before, we actually partnered with the Youth Assembly and AFS a couple of times, and we were among the co-hosts of the Youth Assemblies. My own colleagues and my own daughter, who is also here with us, actually participated in one of the previous Youth Assemblies. So of course there is a strong connection already. And when I used to be a high school teacher, my own students participated in various AFS programs. So of course, and myself, as a teacher, I participated in quite a few AFS programs aimed for the teachers. So there is of course no need to do any introductions. I will not be here on the 11th of August physically, unfortunately, because as you know, UNHabitat is based in Nairobi. But at that time, I will be on leave in my home country in Slovakia. But maybe I can join you virtually, or myself or somebody else from our team can send you also a virtual greeting. We can work it out in one way or another.
Thank you. Thank you so much. So we move forward with our program. Next, I would like to give the floor to Catherine Sotomayor from NGCY to give her brief introduction and the remarks on the topic.
Yes, thank you. So the SDG 11, as the other SDGs, has lost track. As Ms. Maimuna has said continuously in the last week of this HLPF, if we want to accelerate our processes, we need to focus on delivery. We need social integration, climate change, gender perspective, and disaster risk reduction. But how are we going to address all these in the urban future? We need to understand SDG 11 is interconnected to all SDGs, not just for urban, for grassroots, for indigenous communities, for the peripheries and other settlements. Since 2008, and for the first time record, half of the human population started to live in cities, and the numbers now are continuously growing. Since that emerged of numbers, the performance of the cities were being inaccessible and creating public policies with the minimum effort. And at that time, the government's belief was keep accommodating, keep growing, save on resources, and a process in anthropology we call beautification. And that means that they only focus on urbanizing and not planning, actually, the cities. So to tackle urban problems, we need to do the exact opposite. We need new ways of working and engaging. Actions that change the distribution of cities, make them sustainable, accessible, innovative, but above all, we need inclusive cities for all. In that matter, public spaces are usually government's responsibility and capacity in terms of urbanization. The state authorities enter to the agenda in order to be satisfiers of necessities and mediators of recreative and educational spaces. If we expect the cities to be considered effectively sustainable, then we must think of public space, understanding it as a place where different realities and identities converge. With the pandemic, public space was blurred and became non-existent. We moved our public space to our private space. Parks, libraries, schools, all those became empty, and it was impossible to think about them as what they are, the means to create community. 2 years later, we have a new opportunity, recreation of spaces. Spaces that are not foreign to the people with different capacities and mobilities. Women, men, children, and youth, citizens that live together aim to achieve the construction of new ways of interacting. At this very moment, cities are hostile to youth and children. They all have been planning around the needs of cars, private sector, and real estate. That doesn't mean they are our enemies, but we need to stop them first. Recreational spaces for children to develop their social skills and interact with others are not existent. They are not secure, clean, or have the need to go out. I can't recall the moment we lost that track. I remember myself playing and running on streets, having friends, developing my potential through recreation. Cities are already constructed, but that doesn't mean we cannot do something to arrange what has gone wrong. We have a big opportunity ahead. You need the spaces to create community, interact, play, even protest. Without these to represent moving from home more than 1 hour away. A place that allows us to grow is a place where we all can live. But it's not only about government's responsibilities. We are also the citizens. So to my fellow youth, I said, we need to be the guardians of our spaces. Yes, we need to take them, use them, but that came with a responsibility. The change needs to happen from us to how we consume, interact in those spaces, and also how we will amplify our voices and how we can achieve the present and the future. It's from the union that we can have better and cleaner cities. And if it's true that we're most of the population, that means the changes start with ourselves. Cities are ours, and it's our time to take them. We need cohesion to recognize plurality and diversity. Intersectional, intergenerational spaces that really allow us to realize the existence of one another. Sometimes we coexist, but we don't take into consideration the others. We learn how to think individualistically. And the pandemic reinforced those ideas. If we focus on integration, we may contribute to policies that engage our full citizen potential. It also represents not being indifferent to the homeless, people with disabilities, or neurodivergences. We are all holders of human rights. We are all citizens no matter what, in which kind of settlement you live. We need to be guaranteed protection and development, and not to be reduced to the next working force. If we do this, we will ensure leave no one behind. Alongside environmental degradation, cities are polluters, and at the same time are one of the very few ways to provide resources for the population. Constructed areas needs to develop sustainable ways of planification. If we tackle those, it is an opportunity to reduce risk when disasters happen. If we implement our technologies into the settlements that we are integrated, our present and future will change. So generating community is essential and must be the main function of an appropriation of space. Resilient and sustainable cities contribute to our quality of life, but an inclusive city encourages our humanity and sense of belonging. Green infrastructure generates spaces that elevate the quality of life and respects diversity and urbanization. But it's not the only solution. We have different ways of doing things. We have the blue, the care collective. Experts have already developed solutions for all kinds of realities. Localization is needed to implement whatever is best for us. Forest, cultural, and housing spaces need to be conveyed on the land to create and strengthen better communities. Youth have the commitment to change our ways. Let us stand up for our communities. Integrate us in the policymaking processes. Because as well as you, we are all part of the cities, and the solutions can only be addressed collectively. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Next, I would like to give the floor to Ms. Karuna Rana for a brief introduction and remark on the topic.
I hope it works. Is it working? Yes.
All right, good evening, everyone, and thank you for being here. It's the last day of HLPF, so that is great to see some new and familiar faces. So I'm Karuna, and I am a plastic pollution and blue economy specialist, but I'm also the co-founder of SIA, which is a regional organization bringing together young people from 7 small island developing states in Africa and Asia. So I am from Mauritius myself, which is a small island state off the coast of Africa. So I wanted to, I would have thanked UN Habitat because SIA is born because of a youth consultation that they held 10 years ago ahead of the 6th conference. So UNESCO and UN Habitat played a very big role. So I definitely acknowledge that they have a lot of, they do contribute a lot to youth participation. I wanted to start by saying that sustainable communities are safe and inclusive communities, as we've heard. When we talk of safety, it can look like safety on the streets. For example, street harassment is very rampant in a lot of communities and cities, especially for women. And then safety can also look like safe and resilient infrastructure. For example, coming from a small island state, which is very prone to disasters, we've had flooding and especially flash flooding, and a lot of it has been a result of poor infrastructure. Secondly, I want us to think about sustainable cities and communities, but let's not forget communities are not just cities. We also are talking of rural communities, of coastal communities, and this is very important, for example, for a small island state like Mauritius. Now, we are here to talk about the youth voices for sustainable urban future, and it's very, very important to hear these voices. But we just don't need to hear what young people want. We also need to hear what young people are doing. And we've already heard from Kekashi here in terms of what her organization is doing. So I wanted to give one key example of what young people are doing in terms of ensuring sustainable communities, and that is coming from my organization. For us, coming from a small island state, circular economy and good waste management infrastructure, zero waste, basically is very key to ensure the sustainability of a community. So we had a project called the Tap Water Renovation, whereby we used safe drinking water access as a way to reduce reliance on bottled water. In many European countries or even in the US, it is very common for you to go to restaurants and ask for tap water and you get it. It is also common for you to have drinking water fountains. We didn't have that in Mauritius, and it's not a reality in a lot of the developing countries. But tap water is still safe to drink in Mauritius, which is a question of mindset. So what we did as young people is, as a youth-led organization, we mobilized funding to install the first few drinking water fountains in Mauritius. So just picture this: you have a first ever drinking water fountain installed in a public park in Mauritius, and we had the mayor come and launch that, and it was completely installed by a youth-led organization. Young people mobilized funding for this, and this was really powerful. We installed one, then we went for the second one, and then we had a 5 to 6, and after that, now we have them in our tram stations. We also talked to corporations. We went to restaurants and hotels and asked them to become plastic-free. And a few restaurants you can go to now, and they will provide you tap water. We had a large group of hotels and become plastic free, and so you go to the hotel, you don't have to pay for bottled water. And we also talked to policymakers and learned a lot more about how can we be involved in designing better waste management infrastructure. So why am I telling you all of this? I'm telling you this to prove that young people are doing a lot of work that the governments are meant to be doing. But I have been in this space for more than 10 years now, and one thing that bothers me a lot about being in this space and coming from a youth-led organization is we're very often only seen as, we're seen to be volatile, we're seen as volunteers just doing some random work, and that's about it. But that's not the case. The examples I gave you are just one of many, many more examples whereby we're literally doing the work that government should be doing. But we can only do so much with little investment in our work. If you think that the work we're doing is important, and a lot of time the government are doing that work or other organizations are doing that work, and no one's working for free, they're getting paid for it. This is not but unfortunately for a youth-led organization, this is an expectation that we should be, saying we should remain volunteers throughout our life. So I think the point I want to make is that young people are already doing a lot to ensure better and safer and more sustainable communities, but they can only do so much unless we don't invest in them. So I think so my call would be not just to look at young people and youth-led organizations as voices, but look at them as active partners and especially when it comes to implementation. So I would like to end with that, and we'll be happy to take questions. And thank you.
Thank you, Verona. Next, I would like to invite Mr. Bracken Goma to give his brief introduction and organizations and the remarks on the topic.
Thanks so much. It's always really exciting to be here and meet really exciting people that have been in the space for some time. I was just talking to Corona because we met, should have been 8 years ago in Cambridge in the UK, and just seeing how much impact she's created over the years is quite impressive. But also looking in the audience, seeing very familiar faces of incredible young people that are leading the charge and leading the change is quite inspirational. I would like to speak about 3 key elements. One is resilience, 2 is wisdom, and number 3 is equity. In that particular order, specifically because when we reflect on the role of cities are conveners. These are places that have opportunities and challenges. But at the same time, these are places that can give birth to innovation. With the emergence of artificial intelligence, it's in cities where we're seeing young people, young entrepreneurs developing scalable solutions that are creating transformation and helping transform the lives of society. That's very critical because without a more resilient built environment, then it becomes even more challenging for cities to provide those intended results. Hence, we have unintended consequences of development. I'll give you an example of what happened in a very small village in my home country of Zambia, in the western part. So in Zambia, a group of experts from Europe, of course, went to Zambia. They flew 7,000 miles, went to western Zambia, and they found this floodplain because this area is seasonally inundated with water. And when they got there, they said, oh my gosh, this is really exciting. We're going to plant lots of crops. And they decided to plant tomatoes. They said, we're going to plant, acres and acres of tomatoes. They bought they brought seedlings. They bought tractors, and when they went to plant, they realized that communities were quite disengaged. They were like, hey, can you help us water and weed out these tomatoes that we've planted because these are for the community. But there was a huge degree of disengagement from communities. 2 months later, it was time for harvesting these tomatoes. They decided to go there with their trucks, very excited, very elated, because they had worked so hard. When they got to the piece of land, they discovered that there was no tomato. Apparently, next to this piece of land was a river, and there were hippos, and hippos love tomatoes, and they ate all the tomatoes. So when you think about this, you realize that sometimes we go to young people with our preconceived solutions of what they want. Mm-hmm. Very akin to how this group of experts went to Western Zambia with solutions, preconceived, and thought that's what the community wanted. Apparently, in this part of the world, people grow rice. And community said, we didn't come because we don't grow tomatoes, we grow rice. Hence, wisdom is knowledge that is well applied. Mm-hmm. And we see that in public policies. We see that in the way institutions engage young people. And if we want to create resilient communities, want to create resilient cities, we need to listen more than we speak. It sounds very cliche and very easy, but we see anthropologists and social scientists advising that the most difficult thing to do is to listen.
Mm-hmm.
To listen with empathy, empathetic listening, the deepest level of listening that allows all of us to be able to engage in meaningful collaboration. And it's when we reach that deeper level of listening, do we allow for inner knowing to emerge. And I think that's extremely critical, even as we discuss about cities and building more resilient structures. But the challenges that we are also addressing are very interconnected. When we look at what's happening with the ocean chemistry, when we look at what's happening in cities with the urban heat highland, because we have a concrete jungle in most cities, all these challenges are very interconnected, very similar with ecosystems. And as somebody with a very strong environmental science background, we see that the biosphere, the stratosphere, and all elements of the Earth are very interconnected. And hence, the challenges that we are addressing should be seen from that system-wide perspective. Or else we'll continue reinventing the wheel and going back to the drawing board without finding very realistic solutions. The COVID-19 pandemic itself also really exemplified these challenges that we continue to face. And actually, before coming here, I had a crash course. It was a zoonosis crash course. And my wife, who's a medical doctor, was in the audience, gave me a crash course. And in this crash course, I came to realize that cities, just like New York City, and having been here during the COVID-19 pandemic, have a huge concentration of transmission. Transmission in terms of infections, but also most importantly, transmission in terms of the cross-pollination of bright ideas, bright sustainable ideas that can create transformation. And I think it's important for us to also see cities as places where we can incubate solutions and be able to scale them. The last aspect I want to speak about specifically is that of equity. And Corona did highlight that very briefly. As somebody who's slowly becoming a youth alumni, I think I realized that young people are being treated like kindergartens, especially in this space. We are not kindergartens. These are young professionals that have degrees, masters, PhDs, and they should be given the much needed respect in terms of mutual engagement. We are seeing this, as somebody who's been in this space, I see this, we experience this, but the most interesting aspect that makes young people unique is their abilities to organize, collaborate, and push against barriers that are not inclusive. Hence, the element of tokenism becomes even more sickening. So even as we think about the biophysical and physical infrastructure of cities, we need to think about the social policies that create for a space for inclusion. Therefore, within the Sustainable Development Solutions Network, where I have the privilege of serving as global director, we realized that young people were already developing solutions which are very sustainable. But we also didn't want to neglect the financial aspects that underpins their abilities to be able to scale their solutions. So then what we did was we brought in 100 young people. These come through a fellowship we call Local Pathways. So for a period of 10 months, they're given skills. They are supported to transition from just ideation to developing their tangible solutions, and then ultimately being given pathways to impact investors and venture capitalists who can allow them to be able to scale and de-risk their solutions. And over the years, we have managed to incubate close to 1,000 solutions led by young people from over 80 cities around the world. And what we are seeing is a small amount of financial investment has a huge impact, especially on communities that young people serve. And what we are also learning in the space is the fact that as young people continue to devise these solutions, they believe very strongly in collaboration, co-creation, and cooperation. I think those are the fundamental aspects that can bring progress. And the antidote to collaboration, co-creation, and cooperation is cynicism, fear, and disengagement. And we are seeing this even in the international spaces. So my request to leaders that might be joining online or present in the space is try to back off. Go behind young people and say, go in front of me. I'm here to support you. I'm here to mentor you. I'm here to guide you. That's what young people want. If we can really be able to institutionalize and operationalize this level of thinking, I believe that we're going to create a sustainable, just, and equitable society that cares the most about creating conditions for future generations to meet their needs of survival. Thank you.
Thank you, Brenda. Indeed, it was very inspiring and for all of you. And with that, we'll move towards the most interesting segment of the session, that's the intervention from all of you and question and answers. If you have any questions, because I have a lot of questions from all of these panelists here. So if you have any question, just raise your hand or just get lined up at this side, and I'll be happy to provide you the microphone and opportunity to ask any question. So, okay, so I would see that since you do not have any question as of now, so I will move it.
Questions. Yeah.
Please.
Lovely dress.
Otherwise, you have questions, Ali.
Yeah.
I have questions too.
Good afternoon, everyone.
Good afternoon.
Okay, I just have a statement, more than a question, actually. Everything that has been said by all the speakers has been very awesome. It's very profound. But I'm not sure if I got your name, say the last speaker. I had a minor argument with a lady at the United Nations headquarters just last week, because I said something like, I was telling her about a forum that I had started collaborating with other young people from other African diasporas. And I was telling her, explaining what we're trying to do there, that we're trying to amplify our voices as one, so that we can have a stronger voice and we can probably fight for a seat at the UN. And the same issues that you actually talked about are the same issues that I'm very concerned about, because I'm always saying, why are the decisions being made in our absence, that impact us as young people? And in fact, I said, we are the future of this world, and she argued that we're not the future. Why do I dare say that? In fact, she wants to even start a podcast and she wants to challenge me on those matters. And I'm like, you've already lived so many years, and you had an advantage way over me, over decades, over me, and you still want to argue with me? Come on, it's not fair, So those are the things that they don't understand, because they still they want to hold on to their positions, not understanding that they're still operating on their old same minds that are still not changing the systems. So they need us as young people. Things have changed in the world. We are I'm not saying we're better than them. Of course we're not, but we're far more educated now, young people, and we think better. We have fresher minds. We in touch with technology, and we're advanced. So this is our time now for us to stand up as young people, actually, and unite as young people as well. Because another thing that's making them think they can do whatever they want is because we are not united ourselves. So the sooner we get united and understand this is not a competition and we're working towards the same goals, then the better for all of us. Thank you.
Hello, my name is June. So in terms of population, young people are more likely to migrate from rural parts of the country onto the city. So, in terms of population, there are more younger people in cities compared to, let's say, rural parts of any kind of country. But one thing I've seen is that, especially I've been following New York City politics because I've been living here for 5 years. And one thing I realized is that more local it gets, more arcane the whole process becomes, to the point where they have so many red tape, so many bureaucracy, so many ways where even changing a stop sign will take 5 years just to get it through. And I was saying, in terms of doing those kind of local politics or local policy, where you seem to have so many barriers that you never thought about, how do you navigate those kind of barriers that you see in these local politics and local policies? Thank you.
We're up first. Yeah.
I can answer.
Thank you. So,
I think, especially when it comes to non-profits, when it comes to government, when it comes to the public sector, it's usually, let's say that, if you want 10 to be implemented, let's design for 100. Let's aim for 100 because that's what's going to get implemented. So if you aim at 10, you're going to get 2 implemented. Okay, so I think the way to overcome, some of the slowness or sometimes the inertia or the bureaucracy of all the public sector, non-profit, and all the things that are not exactly private sector that will jump into solutions right away and implement, is to aim really, really big and really high. So because that's a small percentage of that's going to be implemented. That's been the formula for surviving in this environment for so many years. It's to really go really, really high, understanding that a percentage of that's what's going to be implemented. So if you aim at 10, 2%. If you aim at 100, you might get the 10% that you want in order to be implemented. I think I love what you said about youth alumni. I think I'm also getting there. And then to your point, going the same way. I can sense your frustration, and I feel that, and I can connect to that because I used to have exactly the same kind of conversation some time ago. But age is a good thing sometimes, and you get spot on the table, on the decision-making table, just because of age and just because of your position. And you're going to get there, okay? Sooner or later, you're going to get there. But don't forget when you get there to open space for young people, because it's exactly what you're asking now, and don't forget that, because you have the possibility to change that when you get there. And that's what I get reminded every day, that, I was in that position before, I wanted those spaces before, and no one seems to should be taking that seriously. Now the first thing that I do is to remind myself to create the spaces for young people, because that's what I wanted at that stage. So when you get there, never forget that, to open the spaces. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. I wanted to answer June's question based on an example that I shared earlier. So for me, it's kind of a little opposite of what you mentioned about aiming higher. For me, it was 2 things. And one of them, which is opposite to what you said, was I went for the low-hanging fruits. I went for the low-hanging fruits, for example, when we wanted to install drinking water fountain in some of the public schools. We had a lot of variants there, a lot of bureaucracy, and we had to go through the educational minister and all of that. So it was very complicated. So we said, scrap that. Let's start with the private schools. So we had more access to the private schools, and then we did that. But the second thing, we were able to install drinking water fountain in a public park. It had to do with relationships, building relationships. In the end, we're dealing with humans. So what that looked like is, maintaining a good relationship with the environment minister, or coming from Mauritius, so it's easier to have access to them, but also to the mayor. And talking to them in their language, it sounds easy, like how do you maintain a relationship, but literally it was following up on every little thing, talking to their staff, and then just keeping. And very often it was also to do with trying to speak in their language. Okay, if we install this here, it may look good for you when you have your elections coming up. Sometimes we have to speak that language. And when I started off, I'm also becoming very soon. But when I started as a very, very, very young person, I took a very different approach to activism. My activism was on the streets, and it was shouting and raising my voices. And I still believe that is important, and I respect it, and we need that. But over the years, my form of activism has changed, has become more advocacy based. Because I come from a place of a young person, but a young person with experience, and I come as a partner. So every time I go and talk to the ministers now, the policymakers, it's me coming with solutions and speaking their language, which it took me years to get there, and I'm not saying that is the only solution, but for me that has worked, and I think we need a combination of both. Thank you.
Absolutely.
Sure.
Thank you. Policies analysis too. And my advice to you is come to a midpoint. You need to, if you want to engage, you have to offer them something. It's not doing their work, because that's not just gonna happen, no? But they have a position. Not everything you ask is going to be delivered, but you can come to a midpoint. And in that midpoint, it comes the intergenerational dialogue. I want this, I offer you this. What can you give me in advance? So that's when public policies go to the Senate, Parliament, whatever you have in your countries. So that's when a midterm comes, that's when they deliver. And sometimes it's not, I totally agree with you. It's speaking in their languages, they tend to have a more technical kind of way of thinking. So in terms of numbers or something, you can deliver that and they will listen. Because in governments, it's all about providing and giving. So that will help you out. Yeah.
I'll also answer, okay, so first comment, I think that, I think every young person has this kind of story of being discriminated against because of our age, and it's something that, a decade ago, it was still there, it's still there, and it's really sad that this kind of mindset's still there, and I think the fact that young people are getting recognized more and more as people who do work on the ground, I think that is slowly shifting a lot of mindsets, but yeah, I think it's just, there are a lot fewer people like that now compared to a decade ago, which I do see as progress, but yeah, it's just us continuing to fight the good fight and doing our work on the ground to create a better world. But yeah, it's just that story that when you spoke about that, it definitely resonated with me, because I could go on and on about how, as a young person facing all of those barriers, how terrible that can be. So thank you so much for sharing that. To June's question, yeah, so I just want to say two things. First, I founded Rainbow Foundation when I was 12 years old, and I was born and raised in an urban environment, and wondering how best I could engage my peers to have greater inclusivity of young people and other underserved communities in the sustainable development process, particularly within an urban context, was really about seeing how best we could identify our local challenges, unique challenges that we could address ourselves, then kind of going from there, and then definitely showing all of these policymakers and the institutions in charge that, we weren't just telling them to do something, we were also working on the ground. Our work really spoke for itself, and that's kind of how we were able to progress with successful sustainable partnerships, working with municipalities, with the Parks Department, with city councilors. And when we saw that, there was a lot of bureaucracy and that something just couldn't be done, the advice that we gave to our young people just to run for the city council, get into that institution themselves so that they could kind of drive the change from there. And we were able to see tremendous success in that as well. So I think that there is avenue for engagement for young people everywhere. It's not just a certain generation that has to sit in a position of power. We as a civil society have a lot of power, but when we saw that, there just was too much of bureaucracy as young people, we encouraged our fellow young people to run for office so that they could create change themselves from that kind of avenue. Now we're seeing that, young professionals, young people in government, young people in civil society creating change. So.
Yes, Brian.
Thanks. That was really good. And thanks for the two questions and contribution. I'm going to say two things. I think when you look at the history of law and jurisprudence, law started because of acceptable social norms. A community realizes that actually it's so wrong to steal. So let's create laws against that. And then it goes to parliament, it's legislated. And I think that's also very similar with what's currently happening in the global youth movement. I have had the privilege of running a small nonprofit and eventually leading a global movement of young people. And what we're seeing across these like sliding tectonic plates are a couple of things. There is a huge level of cynicism about youth, thinking that, oh my gosh, these young people have got so much energy and rigor, and they are calling truth to power. And not everybody likes that. And you experience that both in government or in the United Nations, in all spaces. What do we need to do as a strategy? We need to push back. And we push back by having very concrete recommendations and solutions in terms of what we want to see. That's very important. I think number two, it's the aspect of also what's happening in the United States. There's so much austerity, there's progress, but we're also seeing austerity in so many different countries. Look at what's happening in Florida. Mm-hmm. If you believe in certain things which maybe the government doesn't believe in, right? They're going to be pushed out. And young people are migrating to other cities.
Yes.
Look at what's happening with the high cost of living, for example. Young people are trying to find safe and cheaper places. These things are happening in cities, not in a vacuum. So how do we push back against specific hostile social policies which are pushing young people further out from the periphery or the center? I think that's very critical. So in terms of pushing back, that's very important with clear recommendations. We need to run for office if you can. You need to be actively engaged in the local politics because personal is political. You've been a company or you've been an organization, there are politics everywhere. So you need to understand how to navigate all those things. That's why I believe that even as we are working with innovators, which has been a huge part of my work, I always remind them to say, try to understand the local politics and nuances near where you live. Because those things will affect you whether you like it or not. If tomorrow, after the Summit of the Future next year, the Pact for Future Generation does not reflect the needs of young people, we can change that, right? So how do we make sure that we contribute meaningfully to these processes? That's why I'm encouraging everybody, all of us, try to read all these documents on what's happening next year about the Summit of the Future, the resolution the UN is going to make, how you can contribute, how you can get involved, look at things on the internet, look at organizations which are organized and get involved. Because it's about us. It's about our children and our children's children. And it's our responsibility for us to make sure that we push against specific hostile policies. Thanks.
Thank you. Dr. Jenny Moore, you want to make an introduction, please?
Yes, I do. As a long-term municipal planner at the regional level engaged in sustainability and climate action, I think it's very, many of the comments are very well-founded. And to speak to the barriers, always think that there's a reason why that bureaucracy exists. Often it's engineering standards or other aspects of municipal service delivery that create inertia. So it's the comments around making allies, getting to know some of the people, not just at the elected level, but also at the staff level, participating in open houses and events, making yourself known to parks, to planning, and figuring out where you can intervene and why you can't. There's a big issue here around policy alignment. We say we want sustainable cities, and at the same time, there's some real reasons why those barriers exist. So everything the panel said is fantastic. Get on council, do all of those things, but also bring your curiosity. What are those bureaucratic barriers? Why are they there? And what can you do in civil society? You have far more freedom than municipal people do. So take advantage of your civil society freedoms to find the ways to intervene in dialogue and in action. So I just wanted to put that out there as someone who's had a foot on the other side for many years. Thank you.
Thank you, Doctor. I suppose we don't have any more questions. So we are also moving closer to the time where we will just have final remarks from everyone, and then a summary, and then of course a group picture, and then we will close this. So moving towards the closing of the session, there are a few remarks like, I would like to give, but in the end, first, let me give the floor to you for last quick closing remarks.
Okay, so to have better cities, we need to be in the cities and feel them. We need to engage to our commitment, because it's true, we all are like asking for something, but we also need to deliver something. Because at the end of the day, we are citizens, and we are the ones that are using actually the space of the cities. So really commit to that. Take care of your spaces and engage them, use them. Because if you are thinking that this is not for you, it's for tomorrow's people, you will not change the way that it's now. You have to address that it's for your present. It's tomorrow, it's the next day, and so on. So realize that you are now living in those spaces, and whether you want to change them or to be more precise about how to contribute to your inside circle or to your bigger context. So try to do that, and because we have a commitment, but we also need to address those results. And that will be my recommendations and final remarks. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I'm curious about, a little bit of a different profile, because every time we mention problem, we think of we need an innovation to solve that problem. I think we have plenty of very good ideas out there. I'm looking for the big implementers, the people that they can see the ideas that are already there, they're ready to go to work, and they can scale in other places. And it's a little bit of a different profile, because we keep encouraging, innovation is very daunting, especially for, young people. I work with teenagers a lot, and they look at me when we talk about innovations too much. I prefer to join that project that's going on and help that project go back to the collaboration aspect of it. So I'm very curious to find, the course innovation is always welcome. I'm very curious to find, this group of big implementers, people that want to borrow an idea that works, that it's been proven to work, and they can scale those ideas in moving forward. So that's a little my challenge, especially for the youth. Where can we find the big implementers, the people that are not afraid of copying an idea, stealing an idea that really works, and making it work in another place and scaling that idea in another work? I think that's probably the easiest way for us to move forward. Thank you.
Yeah, I would definitely like to emphasize not kind of leaving behind the principles of urban sustainability when we're talking about sustainable development in general. Just to reiterate, we've so many cities around the world, and urban expansion is happening at this unprecedented rate, and it's important for us to understand what the unique challenges within cities are, and particularly as our panelists have also mentioned, the local challenges that cities face around the world, and particularly since we're talking about young people here, not forgetting that we have born innovators and young people across the world. And when people talk about innovation, they often think like really big things like AI or something like that, but it's really just about addressing your own unique local challenges and creating positive change in that, and young people throughout history have been known to do that. So not forgetting about the power that we as young people have, not leaving us behind, and definitely not leaving behind urban expansion in that area. And of course, we need scale. That's really important, and that is where we need robust policies and a drastic retooling of our global financial support systems to ensure that the work that young people are doing in cities and around the world is actually brought up to scale, and we can spread that positive action all across the world, so that we together, working together as all stakeholders, we can create a world where everyone has a life of dignity. Thank you. For me, what I'm taking away from this conversation is two things. One is the scaling. I think you're very right that we need big implementers, we need more scalable solutions. And the other thing is you mentioned innovation, but then we often forget about social innovation. And that is related to all these, big implementation and scaling projects that we're talking about. Personally, I would like to end with, reiterating what I mentioned earlier, is that when it comes to creating sustainable cities and sustainable communities, I think we've heard a call and we've heard a challenge to young people out here in terms of taking ownership of their cities and communities and making them more sustainable. But I want to add another element to that, saying that there are a lot of young people who are already doing that. So on one hand, there is a challenge, but on the other hand, a lot of us are already implementers. We are already working on creating these solutions. So how do we think a step forward in terms of making these solutions sustainable? And very often when we talk about sustainable solutions, sustainability of initiatives, they can be financial, for example. So, when we think of young people, let's not just think of these broad terms like capacity building, representation, giving them voices. All of these are great, but we need to think further, like how are we financially and technically supporting them in implementing these projects and making them bigger and wider. So let's look at young people as implementers of solutions to sustainable cities and communities. Thank you.
Thanks. I'll say a couple of things. One is don't feed the hippos. So wherever you go, be it in a boardroom or in a community, think about those hippos and don't feed them. I think the other thing is ask questions more than you want the answers. I think asking questions becomes a bit more fundamental because I think questions are what really allows us to think about creative solutions. Ask your local leaders, ask the institutions you work with, ask them tough questions. And in amplifying what Karuna mentioned, when you go into a space with leaders, don't neglect asking about something that's very fundamental and young people don't want to talk about it. Ask about money.
Yeah.
How much investment are you making in this? Or you want to take me to New York conference, what are you providing me with? I feel young people continue to be very exploited and neglected, and that should end. Lastly, I think all of us in here have come from a place of privilege. I think being here, there are millions of other young people out there who don't even have the opportunity to have their voices heard. And I believe that's to whom much is given, much is expected. And when we're in these spaces, we should make sure that we speak out, we voice out, we nag if that's the case. And make sure that as we come out with our voice having been amplified. And also, I'm looking forward to the AFS. I was invited to be on the judging panel, so I think it's going to be very exciting to listen to the innovations.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Thank you. Last, I would like to invite Dr. Jenny Moore for final concluding remarks.
All right, thank you. Again, I'm just so impressed by this panel and this discussion. Everything that the closing remarks have covered are the key essentials in my mind as well around how to move sustainability forward in cities, by youth, for youth, with youth, and with graduated youth. Remember, every single person that you encounter was a youth. And so everyone can relate to the kind of positive energy that you bring, the desire, the reality. You're the generation that is going to live with this forever. So I would encourage you to make connections, ask questions, be curious, don't feed the hippos, but also don't forget that it is, and I think the first commenter said this, it's your city, it's your right to be present and to be engaged and start connecting where you can with each other, because the more the pressure stays on, the more clearly you're able to articulate what it is you're interested in and the pathway to find action right now, not wait for permission, just start moving forward, look at where you can fit in and start making that happen. The faster you'll be recognized as the legitimate force for change that you are. So I applaud all of you today. Thank you so much for participating in this event with me. I'm so grateful to be here. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for everyone for being here, who watched online for both two sessions, and the people who were here for the first session and the second session. To conclude the session, I just want to tell you a few things. I wanted to, make an intervention earlier, but as I heard that young lady, she made a fiery remark about, that people are not, ready to give us the space, and then there are young people who are not ready to, trust other colleagues, and all of these things. Well, I've been working in the youth space since last 40 or 50 years. I'm not young anymore, but I've been brought up by some people who were like very thoughtful, and they were from the very other generation. And the only lesson they taught me that really helped me was to be selfless. This is the most important lesson that I've been taught entire life. It is larger than yourself. It's larger than life. The cause is larger than yourself. Once your cause, whatever you're working on, becomes more than yourself, then you are destined to become successful. No one can stop you. It may take time. It may take some time to be where you want to be. But if it's larger than yourself, it's more than yourself, you are destined to be successful because you are working towards a larger cause. And then there is a force of nature that helps you with that. When you're working for the larger cause, there's a whole force of nature that we cannot see. It's around us, that energy and everything, it conspires to make you more successful. I see young people who come at the UN and other places, they want to do different things, they want to take pictures and promote themselves. That's fine, absolutely. We are now being taught to, think about yourself as well. But being selfless is something beautiful. It can be painful in the beginning, but it's beautiful. It takes you long way because you're playing for the team then. When you're playing for the whole team is playing with you. So keep that in mind, and no one can stop you. And I would like to thank UN Habitat for organizing this. I want to thank UN Environment Program for organizing this. I would like to thank AFS Intercultural Program for partnering and organizing this program. And most importantly, I would like to thank the government of Turkey for providing us a space and help us organize this program. And thank you so much. We'll see you again sometime in the future. Thank you. Yes, and a final group photo, if you all can come at this side, and we will join you from down under, and someone maybe that can take picture for everyone. On this side.
Where?
And we can we can join like this.
I remember we met
I remember that.
Yeah. Wait, we all changed the calendars.
I remember you a little bit. Okay, we'll do 2 shots.
Also, other people are lining up. That other people can please. It would be great if you all can join us.
Okay. 1, 2, 3. SDGs. Okay, now we're gonna get people on there. So everyone stay there.
Okay. I would say Mandazi. Yeah. Turn around.
Three, there we go.
Thank you.
One more.
One more.
One more.
Chapati. Hello.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you. What a pleasure. Nice to meet you. Congratulations.
Oh, no, I'm in Connecticut.
Thank you so much.